someone who should be here today. I got to really appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks. There you go. And then glad you could. That's awesome. Yeah, we've been. Yeah. You've been there for me. Thank you. The timing's right. I announced yesterday. Did you know that? You called me yesterday. This morning. So that's exciting for him. Yeah, I said it's a brand new adventure. He's a courageous man. Yeah, I'm driving, man. Like you said, we have to remake our life. That's a way for him to do it. I support him. Yeah, I think it's a way to build on all of the things that went bad that day and try and turn it into something positive. If they're writers are becoming candidates themselves.
I know, it's so early.
And Trump's running for office again. The mastermind.
Don't remind me. Don't remind me.
Believe me, I wish that our system worked like the Brazilian like they did with recently they disqualified Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
And they took them 3 months just to figure that out.
That was awesome. Hello, Eleanor. Good to see you.
How are you?
Good. How about you?
Very well. You never went away, you know. Not as close as you are, but pretty close.
I'm the closest.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess we just
good. Okay, fine.
started.
Okay, so we'll start with the members of Sergeant Cal. Good deal. Good deal.
I'm unused to not having to worry about the I realize less.
Yeah. All right.
Not used to relaxing into like.
You get to tell your speech. This is Jamie's show. You should probably go ahead and make it. Yeah, I know. But
We can either follow however you guys want to do it.
you got here a little ahead of me, so I'd be willing to go after you. Jamie's going to be first.
Okay.
You take it.
We can just hold off for just a second.
Okay.
One other person coming.
Good deal.
I was going to start off with some remarks.
Oh.
Is that okay?
Before me?
Yeah,
Sure.
and then introduce you.
Great. Great.
Oh my God.
So I'm going to...
So we'll just switch the two.
That was like an impressive
Yes.
physical feat.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for it.
Good morning.
thanks so much for coming.
When are we doing that?
All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Tashawn Waristoria, and I'm a senior associate at Stand Up America. I just want to thank everybody for coming out today and joining us on this cold morning, but the sun is out. Before I start, I also want to recognize two coalitions for helping organize this event. The Not Above the Law Coalition, which is a group of over 150 organizations committed to protecting our democracy and fighting for accountability and the rule of law. As well, I would also like to thank Declaration for American Democracy, which is a coalition that comprises of over 250 organizations dedicated to passing comprehensive democracy reforms, including the Freedom of Vote Act, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and DC statehood. Tomorrow marks 3 years since the attack on the very Capitol building that stands behind us. Not only was it an attack on the building, but in a larger sense, it was also an attack on our democracy. It was an attack on the very concept that a free people can elect its own leaders in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and know that the peaceful transfer of power will occur when the time comes. 3 years ago, that concept was tested. And for the first time in our nation's history, the peaceful transfer of power did not occur at a scheduled time. Today, you'll hear from speakers about the attempts to whitewash and misrepresent the events of that day and the critical importance of not forgetting those lessons. You will hear from members of Congress who I thank for joining us during their recess when Congress is not in session, and other organizational leaders at the forefront of the fight to protect our democracy and voting rights, as well as working to strengthen and expand them. Thank you again, and with that, I'm thrilled to bring up Rep. Jamie Raskin, for Maryland's 8th District.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mr. Well, good morning, everybody. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. This is the hard, inescapable, ineradicable fact that Donald Trump and his followers have never been able to accept to this day. And that was the cause of the riots and the violent insurrection and the attempted political coup that took place on January 6th. Donald Trump's refusal to accept what took place. The political scientists tell us that the hallmarks of an authoritarian or fascist political party are that, one, they do not accept the results of democratic elections that don't go their way. Two, they refuse to renounce or they openly embrace political violence as an instrument.
What's the matter with, is something wrong with this sign? Israel not above the law. Hold Israel accountable.
Hold Israel accountable.
They accept.
Worse than Jan 6. Hold Israel accountable.
Israel is not above the law.
They accept. I'm sorry. Let me just start that again. That authoritarian and fascist parties that don't accept democratic process and the rule of law, they reject the results of democratic elections that don't go their way, number one. And number two is they embrace political violence as an instrument for obtaining political power. Now, okay, forgive us for the interruption. These are hard times, obviously. We're in defense of democracy and human rights and peace all over the world. That's what we stand for, and that's why we're together here today. My friends, I just want to say this. The struggle that began on January 6th in this building continues to this day. Donald Trump is out there saying that he will issue a pardon to the more than 700 people who were convicted of participation in the violent insurrection against the Union. So there are people who've been convicted of assaulting federal officers, people convicted of seditious conspiracy, which means conspiracy to overthrow the government, people convicted of destroying federal property, and so on. Donald Trump is saying that he is going to pardon all of these people, and he means it. We must take him at his word. He's already pardoned a whole bunch of political criminals like Paul Manafort, like Michael Flynn, like Roger Stone, like Dinesh D'Souza, like Steve Bannon. These people form the inner core of the Donald Trump for President campaign in 2024. And what he's saying is that he will release and pardon these political shock troops who are willing to commit violence in the name of the Trump party. So I'm delighted to be joined by several colleagues from Congress who are here. One of them, Eleanor Holmes Norton, represents the people of Washington, D.C. And it was my great honor to stand with Eleanor Holmes Norton as a floor leader for D.C. statehood in the last Congress, where the House of Representatives voted to approve admission of Washington, D.C. as a new state to the Union. And when we started that process, I said I wanted to thank the people of Washington, 713,000 tax-paying, draftable U.S. citizens who have a real, valid political grievance, not a counterfeit, phony political grievance, but did not come down here and beat the daylights out of 150 of our police officers who did not come down here and try to overthrow the Constitution. So Eleanor Holmes Norton has been the leading champion for D.C. statehood for decades. Please welcome Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I want to thank DC Vote and my long-term friend, Jamie Raskin, for organizing today's event. On January 6th, 3 years ago tomorrow, the U.S. Capitol was attacked by individuals seeking to overturn our democratic form of government. while President Trump refused to send in the D.C. National Guard to the Capitol, the Metropolitan Police Department voluntarily responded, protecting the Capitol, Congress, and democracy itself. Governors of the states have control over their National Guard units. Because D.C. is not a state, at least not yet, authority to deploy the D.C. National Guard falls under the president. I have introduced a bill for many years that would give this authority to the D.C. mayor, who tried for hours to get the Guard deployed on January 6th, while our efforts were ignored. Had D.C.'s mayor had control of D.C.'s National Guard that day, the response would have been hours earlier, potentially saving lives. D.C. residents, the majority of whom are black and brown, are worthy and capable of governing themselves. I will not stop pushing for enactment of my D.C. statehood bill, which would give D.C. full equality with the states, including a governor, and with power over their own state's National Guard, so that it can respond swiftly when confronted with future crises. In the meantime, I'll be pushing for enactment of my bill to give D.C.'s mayor control of the D.C. National Guard. Thank you for inviting me to speak today.
I'm fine. Can you hear me okay? I apologize if I repeated anything because I wasn't able to hear what they said. But let me say this. I think January 6th was a huge wake-up call for me. I was in private practice at the time, but just saw it on my computer. When I saw people climbing up the sides of the Capitol and breaking into the building, I actually thought it was, like a fake image of some kind. I had no idea it was real until later. And then when I saw people breaking into the building and starting to hurt people, I know multiple officers were injured that day. Many were, 5 deaths, I think, resulted for officers that day as well. So I know that we had serious consequences from that day. We all saw it. We all realized what took place. The Congress had hearings on it. They laid out the information extensively. So we know all of the truth that's out there, the documents that are out there, the videos that are out there. But then I got up today and opened up the Washington Post and saw that 25% of Americans believe that the FBI was behind the assault on the Capitol on January 6th. So from my perspective, January 6th was a wake-up call, but today, 3 years later, we need a true call to action to address this. We've got to get back on track with respect to making sure that the big lie that's been told over and over again by Donald Trump and many of his members of the Republican Party, the public needs to hear the truth about that. We've got to make sure that they get that information so that they can make the right decision based on the correct information. And the other part that we need to make sure continues to happen is right down the street. The courthouse, this is between here and the White House, has been moving forward with prosecutions for all of these January 6th defendants for more than several years. And they're on the process of convicting, I think they've convicted over 700 people so far. They're continuing to move forward with that. There's sentencings that are going forward as well. The sedition prosecutions resulted in jail sentences of over a decade for each of those individuals. I think it's critical for us to make sure that that continues to go forward, and also the court processes too that make sure that Donald Trump is held accountable as well. So for example, he's facing the 91 criminal counts. I think it's critical to make sure that that goes forward, that those cases take place. But also in addition to that, I think we've got to make sure that the cases that are here that involve the individuals that broke into the building that day, all of those individuals have to be held accountable. Yesterday, the U.S. Attorney's Office held a press conference that said, yes, they've dealt with almost 1,000 people so far, but they potentially have hundreds more to prosecute too. We've got to make sure that that goes forward so that whether the folks that are out there pushing the big lie get held accountable for that or not, the people who actually broke in that day and caused damage, disrupted the democratic process, and tried to actually overthrow the democracy that day, they all have to be held accountable. I did want to say this one thing too before I go. A couple nights ago I was watching the Channel 9 news and I saw an individual, Sergeant Gunnell, who's with us here today. And I really thought that it was important for us to give him a chance to speak about what he went through that day and make sure that people hear both sides of what happened. As he pointed out that day, there are a lot of people who are defendants in these cases who are trying to use their military background to get mitigation, to get leniency from the court as they're sentenced. He's a veteran. He served as well. It's important for him to get his story out so people can hear it and make sure that they balance out who the real patriots are, who the people who really are working for the United States and making a difference, and he's definitely in that category. So I definitely wanted to introduce Sergeant Gunnell and ask him to come up and make a few comments.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want, tomorrow is going to be a solemn day, not only for myself but for many of my colleagues who, almost 3 years ago, defended the Capitol against the mob. I did what I did, and my colleagues did what we did, not because we were seeking any accolades, awards, or medal, but because it was our duty, it was our job to defend the country, defend the Capitol. And one thing that I had to tell the new Speaker of the House, when he tells everyone that the rioters, the mob members, they need to be blurred out on the videos because he doesn't want the Department of Justice to identify and prosecute those members of the rioters. And then in the same breath, in the same sentence, he says he's a member of the party of the law and order, the rule of law, and then in the same breath he says blur out their faces because he doesn't want them to be identified, prosecuted. I risked my life, my colleagues risked their life protecting them on January 6th, and that's not how you support the police officers. That's not how you support us, the law enforcement, all police officers. You claim to be the party of law and order, and you're not proving that you are. You are not supporting the police officer, you're supporting the rioters. When you call those individuals who came to hunt you guys down, room by room, and the only reason why they didn't make it to you was because the efforts the police officer did on that day, those people were not patriots. Those people were not hostages. Those people were not peaceful. If you want to see pictures and videos of the fighting, then let's walk down to the lower West Terrace. I'll show you what I did to defend you and your colleagues on that day. When you call those people patriots, what that makes us, the police officers, then? What does that make us, the law enforcement officer? What was our sacrifice for? If you keep calling them patriots. They were not patriots. They were trying to kill you, your fellow colleagues, the next 3 people in line to the succession of the presidency, including Mike Pence. It was an attack on his own safety, along with his family members. And the nuclear codes were here. So if that was not a national security, I don't know what it is. And I don't know how to convey you that on January 6th, we almost lost our democracy. And if it wasn't because the action that the police officer, did on that day, we would have lost it. Did we accomplish everything that we tried to do? No, we failed. We felt defeated. But that's because we had thousands and thousands of people here attacking us, breaching the Capitol. And many of these members behind me, they probably wouldn't have not made it if it wasn't because of the efforts that we did on January 6th. Don't tell me you support the police officer. Don't tell me you support law. You are the party of law and order when you don't even want an investigation about what happened. When you continue to support the same person that continue to undermine our democracy, each and institution that is able to hold him accountable. Mitch McConnell, right after the impeachment, he said the former president was responsible for it. Kevin McCarthy said that on January 6th. I went home on January 6th at 4 a.m. after arriving on January 6th at 6 o'clock here at the Capitol. My day was long. My colleagues' days were long. For you, might have been an hour, a few hours of that you endure January 6th. For us, it was ongoing and still is. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in court dealing with that ramification of that day. And I'm continuing to fight for those, for myself, for those of us who were affected by it. I was assaulted by more than 40 people on that day. And then not a single one, except for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, had reached out to me. But they claim that they support the police officer, each one of them, including the former president and everybody down. Don't tell me, because I don't believe you. And I think the American people see that through. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your courage. Next speaker I want to bring up is Mr. Svante, President of People for the American Way.
Hi, everybody. My name is Svante Myrick. I'm the president of People for the American Way. We are best known around these parts for two things. One is being founded by Norman Lear over 40 years ago to fight for and protect and expand our democracy. And the second is at one point employing the now honorable Congressman Jamie Raskin, something we're extremely, extremely proud of. He was teaching us then, he's still teaching us now, about what America can and should be. It should be a place for protest, right? However loud, however boisterous, however disruptive, protest is okay. But we're here to commemorate something that was not okay, something that went beyond annoying, something that went beyond disruptive, something that was lethally dangerous. Lethally dangerous not just to the brave officers who are fighting to protect the heart of our capital, but to every American who's striving to build a life of purpose and satisfaction. I came to this work because I was the mayor of Ithaca, New York, a beautiful city in upstate, probably the most beautiful with apologies to Dustin, who you'll hear from in a little bit, beautiful in upstate New York. And I was very proud of the work that we were doing. I was very proud of everything I'd accomplished. I was very proud of the community that had lifted me up and bolstered me. And on January 6th, I watched, and it occurred to me that there were forces in this country that, if left unchecked, could unravel everything that we've built, that nothing that you work for, nothing that you strive for, nothing that you sought to achieve could actually be sacred. Nothing could be safe if our democracy was not safe. So I actually called the founder of People for the American Way, at that point already a friend and mentor of mine, Norman, and asked him what it is we could do. And he said that we could do a few things. We could work to make sure that the courts protected us. And so far, in so many ways, they have. He said that we had to fight at the state levels. And so far we have, turning back hundreds of state bills, but 56 of them have gotten through. 12 in the last year alone have gotten through, pushed by far-right extremists to restrict people's right to vote. And what he said more than anything, Norman fought the Nazis in World War II. He came home to fight fascism and extremism. What he told me more than anything was that this fight on January 6th was not the beginning of a fight, and neither was it the end of a fight. But if we were committed, we could win this fight over the coming decades, over the coming years. Last month, some of you might know, we lost Norman Lear. At 101 years old, he passed away. We told him no more skydiving, and he just refused it. And my last conversation with him 2 weeks before he passed was very similar to our very first one. He wanted to know what we were doing to defend democracy on the ground. What were we doing in Virginia? What were we doing in Ohio? What were we doing in Wisconsin? I think if more of us woke up every day and asked ourselves what Norman asked himself, just what can we do where we live? What can we do to fight? We would be better off. And we at People for the American Way believe that we are on the right track. If we follow Glenn Ivey, Rep. Norton, and Representative Jamie Raskin, if we follow those in Congress and support those who are fighting to defend our democracy, if we fight through this year in 2024, we can keep safe everything we hold dear. Because our democracy is not an abstract thing. Our democracy is the key to keeping us all safe. Now, there's one other person I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce now. And I hope, boy, I tell you, I've been heckled by a lot of folks. But whatever internal megaphone he's got is impressive, huh, folks? We need to get him as a quarterback for the Giants. I mean, he can call out those audibles. Well, I'm going to wish Lisa Gilbert the best because what she says always deserves to be heard. I hope you'll welcome the Vice President of Public Citizen, Lisa Gilbert.
Thank you so much for that, Svante, and I will try to project. As he said, I'm the Executive Vice President of Public Citizen, and Public Citizen works to protect our democracy, to fight corporate power, to make sure our system is fair and representative. And I am so honored to be here today with these incredible congressional champions and with these amazing colleague organizations. Public Citizen is a leader in the Declaration for American Democracy, and we co-chair the Not Above the Law Coalition. As Tashawn said at the top, the Not Above the Law Coalition is dedicated to accountability and the rule of law, and really there is no more important day to talk about these concepts. Tomorrow, it will be 3 years to the day since we face an unprecedented assault on our democracy. January 6th will forever be remembered in infamy. The lies and the violence are truly seared into our collective national memory. 3 years ago, more than 2,000 rioters entered the Capitol, they looted and they vandalized the building itself. As Sergeant Gonal said, 140 police officers were attacked and 5 people eventually lost their lives. Most Americans watch the events of January 6th play out on their television screens and in their Twitter feeds, and more than 4 out of every 5 Americans condemned what they saw. So the good news is that our system of justice is working. Donald Trump is in the midst of being held accountable for his crimes in the courts. The more stressful news is that it is 2024. So we are now less than a year out from the next presidential election, and reasonable people are justifiably worried about whether the will of the American people will actually prevail. So as we look ahead to the election, we have to reaffirm our American beliefs, our belief in a peaceful transfer of power, our belief in the legitimacy of our elections, and our belief that we live in a nation where we respect the results. The hard truth of the matter is that in the 3 years since the insurrection, we actually have not done enough to protect our democracy, to really ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. And we need real concrete action to fix that. We need to adequately fund our elections. We need to protect our poll workers and election workers on the ground. We need to fight against mis and disinformation, including the new threat of artificial intelligence-generated misinformation. We need to continue to hold accountable the perpetrators of the big lie. We must work to uncover the secret money corruption in our democracy. And of course, we must eventually pass legislation that enshrines all of this in law in the form of the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Together, we can all make sure that we don't repeat these mistakes, that we have a robust democracy that is backed up by the confidence of the American people, that can hold criminal actors accountable, and one where our elections are safe. So thank you. I hope that was loud enough. And now I'm going to hand it to our next speaker. I'm honored to bring up Dustin Zarni, Elections Commissioner of Onondaga County Board of Elections.
Thank you so much. I'm honored today to be in our nation's capital, honored to stand with some of the people behind me that I consider personal heroes of mine. But that honor is laced with sadness today because we are marking the third anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. The big lie that led to the insurrection continues to this day. It is having an adverse impact on election workers throughout the country. The Brennan Center last year released a study that said 45% of all lead election officials have reported an increase in physical threats and harassment. And 20% of those lead election officials have decided to retire before the 2024 election because of that. Issue 1 released a report later last year of the 11 Western states that showed that this problem may be greater than we thought. 40% of the lead election officials in those states are going to be new for the 2024 election. And in battleground states, it's even worse. Arizona, 14 of the 17 counties in Arizona have new lead election officials going into 2024. CNN said that Pennsylvania has 40 of their 70 counties have new election officials going into 2024, and they've all left because of the harassment, because of the targeting that has happened, because of the big lie. We have lost hundreds, if not thousands of years of experience of election officials going into the crucial 2024 presidential election. The big lie continues to this day. It's resulted in voter suppression laws across the country. It's resulted in decreased resources for boards of elections to do their job. And even citizen groups have formed to go door to door to target voters in New York State and harass them, wrongly accusing them of voter fraud. I'm honored here to come here today to ask for federal legislation to protect election workers that will parrot a lot of the state legislation that has already happened. We need resources to be able to deliver the vote safely and accurately in 2024 so the voters' voices are heard. I believe in the bipartisan boards of elections across this country. People that have come to serve the public. They're not doing it to get rich. They're not doing it to get famous. They're doing it to serve their friends and neighbors. And they deserve the protections of the federal government and their state governments, and yes, their local governments to make that job possible. So I'm hopeful that we can see legislation in this next year in the states and in the federal government and resources directed so those boards of elections can do their job in a safe and accurate manner and deliver the voice of the American people to the ballot box and give them their choice this election. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for attending. And I'd like to. What's that?
Second best city enough.
The second best city. Syracuse is beautiful in its own way, Svante. So I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Donald Sherman, Executive Vice President and Chief Counsel for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington.
Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for being here. My name is Donald Sherman. I'm a government ethics lawyer at CREW. I'm also a former congressional staffer who worked in the building behind me. I'm also a DC resident who watched in horror along with the nation and the world as the place where I once worked and the place where I taught my kids how to ride their bikes was attacked in an effort to overturn a free and fair election. This was an insurrection in my own neighborhood. CREW is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that uses legal and policy advocacy along with robust research and communications to promote ethics and transparency in our government and in our elections. 3 years ago, a violent mob incited by former President Trump stormed our Capitol in an attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The insurrection disrupted the peaceful transition of presidential power for the first time in our nation's history. The gravity of this situation cannot be overstated. But this is where Section 3 of the 14th Amendment steps in. a constitutional provision forged in the aftermath of the Civil War that disqualifies oath breakers who engaged in insurrection against our Constitution. This disqualification clause is an essential safeguard for our democracy. Inciting a violent mob to overturn an election and disenfranchise millions of Americans is exactly the kind of undemocratic activity that meets this test. Section 3 is necessary to protect our democratic process from those seeking to undermine it through insurrection or rebellion. It was literally built for this moment. The only question is, are we? Are our courts? If we don't use this tool to defend our democracy now, we may be facing another insurrection a year from now or further into the future. Since the Reconstruction era, there have only been 2 successful lawsuits to disqualify insurrectionists from office, both of which were brought by Crew on behalf of brave citizens willing to stand up for the Constitution. Crew's case representing New Mexico residents in 2022 removed Cowboys for Trump founder Coy Griffin from office as a county commissioner, and Crew's case in Colorado on behalf of 6 Republican and unaffiliated voters led the Colorado Supreme Court to hold just a month ago that Donald Trump was disqualified and could not appear on the Colorado presidential primary ballot. Now, former President Trump has tried to muddy the waters to make these issues seem complicated, but they aren't. The only fact finders to reach the merits of Section 3 issues found that January 6th was an insurrection and that Donald Trump engaged in it. Section 3 is a qualification akin to age or citizenship, enforceable without a criminal charge or a conviction. No one, not even popular candidates or former presidents, is above the law. But the accountability effort is not about any one organization, which is why we were glad to receive help in our litigation from groups in the DFAD coalition, among others, and why we were proud to file briefs and advise the main challengers, who secured a decision from Secretary Bellows disqualifying Trump from that state's ballot. Preventing another January 6th requires teamwork. After all, our democracy is on the line. 3 years after the tragedy of January 6, 2021, the effort to ensure accountability for the insurrection and related efforts to subvert the 2020 presidential election remain ongoing. Crew and other leaders assembled here and across the country are going to continue to do the work necessary to promote that accountability. Now, in my time on the Hill, I worked for the late Elijah Cummings. And in 2019, he sat before this nation in a hearing where Congressman Raskin attended and Congresswoman Norton attended. And he said, as he stared death in the face, when we are dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, what did we do to keep our democracy intact? He was in that moment, even as he faced the disease that would take his life, and we are in that moment now. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is a crucial defense mechanism to prevent future insurrections from Donald Trump or anyone else. We hope that our leaders across the street and across the nation are listening and will vindicate the Constitution and reaffirm that no one is above the law. Thank you very much. I want to pass the mic to my colleague Naveed Shah, who's the political director at Common Defense.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Naveed Shah. I'm the political director of Common Defense. We're a grassroots veterans organization. I'm also a veteran of the U.S. Army and the war in Iraq. When I was in Iraq in January of 2010, they were holding their second ever national elections. For many Iraqis, it was the first time that they had the chance to cast their ballot. On that day, the insurgents were not targeting the American soldiers who were providing security for those elections. Instead, they were targeting their own people. More than 100 Iraqi people were killed or injured that day across the country as they simply sought to cast their ballot and exercise their fundamental right to vote. In that moment, the sanctity of our rights became clear to me, and I promised to never take that for granted. So when I saw what happened right here on January 6, 2021, I was more than just shocked and appalled. I was scared for what could happen to our country if we allowed the big lie to fester and to allowed insurrectionists to take power. 3 years ago on that dark January day, our nation witnessed a terrifying assault on the foundations of our democracy. A mob incited by lies and fueled by a hunger for power stormed the Capitol, leaving a trail of violence, trauma, and shattered trust in its wake. It wasn't just an attack on a building. It was an attack on every vote cast, every voice, every principle that America was built upon. The scars of that day run deep. 5 lives were lost, hundreds were injured, and the fabric of our nation was left in tatters. But let us not forget the true culprit, the poisonous mix of political ambition and disregard for the truth that birthed that insurrection, Donald J. Trump. Fueled by personal grievance and a hunger for power, weaponized a lie about a stolen election and unleashed a mob against our democratic process. And while that day etched itself in our history, it wasn't an isolated incident. The shadows of January 6th linger. Across the country, right-wing politicians continue their assault on our democracy, erecting new walls to hinder our vote, spreading conspiracy theories, and targeting election workers with harassment and threats of violence. They aim to dismantle the very mechanisms that guarantee our freedom to choose our elected leaders, turning free and fair elections into partisan witch hunts. But remember this, America has seen darkness before, and each time we have emerged stronger. This time will be no different. Now is the time for American heroes to stand up for what's right. We, the people, will not stand by as our democracy is dismantled. We will rise together. Our voice is a chorus of resistance against those who seek to suppress our rights and silence dissent. We demand accountability. Those who incited, aided, and abetted this insurrection must face the full consequences of their actions. We will not let this precedent for political violence stand with impunity. We demand protection for our election workers, the guardians of our nation's democratic process. They deserve to work without fear, and we will not tolerate the intimidation and harassment that seeks to drive them away. And most importantly, we demand action. We urge Congress and state legislators to enact democracy reform across the country. We need stronger voter protections, we need clear and uniform voting standards, and most importantly, an end to the gerrymandering that distorts the will of the people. We need to protect our ballots from manipulation and our elections from interference. When I immigrated to America as a young boy, I took an oath to this country. And when I joined the Army, I took another oath to protect and defend this Constitution, to protect it from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And to make it no mistake, MAGA Republicans are a domestic threat to this Constitution and to this country. So today, let this be our oath. We will not let January 6th define us. We will not let lies and fear sow discord within our nation. And we will remember the fallen, honor their sacrifices, and reclaim our democracy, one vote, one voice at a time. We are the custodians of this republic, and the future of American democracy rests on our shoulders, on your shoulders. Let us show the world that even in the face of darkness, the American spirit remains undimmed, unshakable, and forever resilient. Together, we will rise above, rebuild our trust, and ensure that America, the beacon of hope and liberty for the world, shines brighter than ever before. Thank you. Up next is Justin Quast of the League of Conservation Voters.
Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Quasta. I'm the Democracy Program Director at League of Conservation Voters. So the insurrection on January 6th attacked a core tenet of our democracy, and that says that the will of the people will be protected and respected. For over 250 years, our democracy has put that into practice by making peaceful transitions until 2021. At a time where we've seen the hottest temperatures on record, extreme weather events happening across the country and across the world, and scientific certainty that climate change is human caused, the American people have gone to the ballot box election after election and have clearly voiced their demand to address our climate. Now, the environmental movement sees the political violence that happened here on January 6th as fully in line with the powerful interests that continually undermine the will of the people in our democracy. Whether it's big spending oil, whether there's oil big spending influencing our elections, or individuals storming the Capitol in order to overturn certified results, the goal is the same. That is why we say that we need to have a healthy democracy in order to address climate change. Because we can't effectively address climate change if the pro-environmental will of the American people isn't being respected. We can't fully address climate change if our elected officials don't represent the diverse communities around the country that are affected negatively by our environment. We can't effectively address climate change if communities of color who experience the worst impact of environmental justice are ignored and systematically erased. We can't effectively affect climate change if we consistently spread lies in person and online that baselessly attack the legitimacy of our elections. We can't effectively affect climate change if workers are being attacked for doing the right thing and counting our votes in the election. And we can't effectively address climate change if political violence is used to overthrow our system of government. As an environmental organization, we support the right to protest. We believe that nonviolent protests can be a tactic in order to affect positive change. But January 6th was not a protest. January 6th was an insurrection. It was a violent attack on our democracy aimed at silencing the will of the voters and the American people. We can't let January 6th happen again. Our democracy can't handle it, and our environment can't afford it. So with that, we're asking Congress, we're asking the courts, we're asking the administration to do everything in their power in order to ensure that the horrors of 2021 aren't repeated again. By passing the Freedom to Vote Act, by passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, by fully funding our elections in order to ensure that every voter can cast their vote freely, fairly, safely, and securely in 2024, and by holding the perpetrators of January 6th accountable, because we know that no one is above the law. Thank you. And now at this time, I'm going to bring up Jose Morales Jr., who is the spokesperson for Courage for America.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jose Morales. I am honored to be here today representing Courage for America alongside this incredible coalition. But firstly, I want to thank Congressman Raskin, Congressman Ivey, and Congresswoman Norton for joining us today and marking a somber occasion. A year from tomorrow, on January 6, 2025, it'll be the first time Congress certifies a presidential election since the insurrection. And according to recent polling, 2/3 of Americans think another insurrection is imminent, and we cannot allow that to happen. That's why, as a country, we must work to ensure a peaceful certification of the 2024 election. However, that can only start by making sure every American knows what actually happened. So here's what happened. On January 6th, 2021, insurrectionists were incited by MAGA extremism to attack the U.S. Capitol, the standing symbol for democracy in this country. And the events on that day were horrific, a traumatic event for all of us. And I stand with the vast majority of Americans and people around the world who were appalled by what they saw on their television screens or at home with their phones. And for those who told their stories in the days that followed. Captain Police Sergeant Gunnell and Courage for America's own Officer Michael Fernone are just two of the stories by the men and women whose lives were endangered by the insurrectionists, and all told 140 police officers who stood on the front lines to defend our democracy were attacked by 2,000 rioters who broke into the U.S. Capitol on that day. 5 people died. As we reflect on that painful day in American history, we are asking everyone to also look forward. Congress has a major role to play in certifying the 2024 election results and possibly picking the candidate if no candidate receives 270 electoral college votes. But regardless of who is running or where they stand on the political spectrum, ensuring a free and fair election should be a nonpartisan issue. And Congress must be united in prioritizing the security of our democracy for all future generations. However, as many of us know, today the road to get there feels harder than it should be. MAGA extremists have chosen to undermine our democracy at every juncture and will continue to do so by standing firm on their decisions to vote against the 2020 election, continuing to spread and perpetuate the big lie that the election was stolen, minimizing what happened on January 6th, 2021, condoning the actions of extremists who stormed the Capitol, and even now, as we speak, pushing harmful anti-democracy legislation that makes it harder for everyday Americans to vote, while also defunding election security grants. We're beginning a new year, and I'm asking us to show a resolve to defend against these dangerous anti-democracy initiatives we see in Congress being pushed by MAGA extremists. We cannot allow false narratives, misinformation, and extremism to win. We simply cannot. We have to tell the truth. Regardless of where we come from, no matter your walk of life, what makes us proud to be an American is our ability to vote for our elected officials. And this right is often undervalued and taken for granted, but nevertheless, it is what makes this country a beacon of hope and one that many who come to join. I am so proud to work in tandem with Courage for America. We are using every tool at our disposal to inform the American people of what I just spoke about here today and what's at stake if we do not secure our democracy to ensure peaceful certification of the 2024 election. That includes sharing the stories of those impacted by the insurrection, uplifting the needs of everyday Americans, some of whom have joined me here today for this solemn anniversary, traveling from Nebraska, Texas, Maryland, and places all over. They know that securing our democracy is personal to them. I hope it's personal to you. They'll continue to share their story and this message about the dangerous precedent that was set on January 6th and that we can stop another insurrection. During a time of great division in this country, now more than ever, I take this as a call to stand united against extremism in Congress because our democracy as we know it is at stake. And before I go, I want to also thank Common Defense, who's here with us today, who helped us mark this solemn occasion just a year ago. We worked together on this and so many issues with other members of the Not Above the Law Coalition and anyone who still believes that democracy, though on the line, is worth fighting for. Thank you everyone for being here today. In truth, and protecting and securing our democracy must be a team effort. It's an honor to be on this team with all of you here. I'll now pass it over to Tashawn. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for standing out here. As we close today, I just want to remark on all the comments that have been said. It is clear accountability, the rule of law are not just slogans. Comprehensive democracy reform is imperative. That means passing the Freedom to Vote Act, passing the John R. Lewis Act. DC statehood must happen. I want to thank everyone again. Reporters, all the speakers are going to stay here, so if you have questions, please feel free. Come forward, you can gaggle, but appreciate everybody, and everyone have a good day. Thank you. Thank you. We don't have time, unfortunately.
You don't have time for questions?
Give me 1 second.
Sorry?
We can do a free questions. Right. Sorry, thank you about that.
Raskin, yeah. Since you agreed.
Yeah.
Eddie, what are the stakes? What's the importance of the appeals court review of this presidential immunity claim?
Well, let me digress for a moment here. In case it's not totally obvious to everyone here, there is no one at this event who supports genocide. There is no one at this event who supports racism. There is no one at this event who supports apartheid. There is no one at this event who supports terrorism. And I cannot imagine a group of two people who thinks that somehow it's an effective tactic to come and interfere with an assemblage of progressive democratic people standing up for our freedom. So back to your question. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, given to us by the great Republicans of the 19th century in 1868, says that no one who swears an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and violates that oath by engaging in insurrection or rebellion shall ever be allowed to hold federal or state office again. The language is perfectly clear. It's totally unambiguous. And so we're going to hear from the Supreme Court, I hope, that they are real originalists, they are real textualists, they accept the language of the Constitution as is written. Now, some people think that Clarence Thomas, some people think that Sam Alito, some people think that Mrs. Waterford, or whatever her name is, will always vote with Donald Trump no matter what. Perhaps that's right, but I'm hoping that there will be a core of justices who will actually stand by the Constitution of the United States, the way that we are here to stand by the Constitution of the United States today.
Do you think Justice Thomas should recuse himself?
Well, Justice Thomas's wife was directly involved in organizing the protests that became the violent insurrection which backed up Donald Trump's coup, his attempt to overthrow the election of 2020. So she was directly and integrally involved in those events. I don't think there's anybody in America who could reasonably look at a situation and say that a justice who's married to somebody who was a key participant in these events shouldn't recuse himself. Obviously, under the Supreme Court's very lax ethics code that it finally just adopted for itself a few months ago, it's going to be up to him. But I think that the country should stand up and say that Justice Thomas, for one, must recuse himself because of the involvement of his wife in these events. So, yeah.
Jonathan Svante with Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, formerly from the Post-Standard of Syracuse. He's with the Syracuse group here.
Yeah.
The reason I asked is Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states that House Republicans tried to overturn the election results and tried to get the Supreme Court to throw out the thing. And I'm a resident of Pennsylvania. Am I going to be worried about another type of insurrection? Again, the stop the steal, the hidden votes, that the threats against all the battlegrounds, against election workers.
Yeah. Well, the reason that I'm so thrilled and excited about the assembly of so many great civil society groups here today is because people understand that the people's election is actually threatened again by Donald Trump and his cultish followers. They have never recanted their claim that Donald Trump actually won in 2020. He's running around the country saying he's going to pardon the January 6th insurrectionists who are in jail, even though the other half of the time they're saying that they're actually Antifa fighters and FBI agents, which would make it hard to understand why they're protesting for their removal, and Donald Trump is saying he's going to pardon them. But in any event, there's no logic over there in the land of conspiracy theory. So yes, we have to defend the election at every level, at the precinct level where Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss defended the election. We've got to defend it at the state level where Brad Raffensperger, at least last time, did the right thing. We're going to have to defend it on January 6th, again, where Vice President Pence withstood incredible pressure to step outside of his constitutional role and just declare Donald Trump the winner. We're going to have to try to mobilize on a cross-partisan basis everybody who supports constitutional democracy to defend the Constitution. So, yeah.
You've been on this journey for a while now. Are you confident going into this leg of the fight that you'll be effective? And a second question to that is, do you feel that your actions yesterday with your report coming out is going to have any impact on this broader decision to hold former President Donald Trump accountable?
Yeah, thank you for both those questions. Number one, the vast majority of the American people believe in democratic institutions and believe in free and fair elections. It is only authoritarian parties which take the position that they can't lose an election, and if they do, the election was contaminated. that is a hallmark of fascist political parties, that they don't accept the results of free and fair elections that don't go their way. But the vast majority of Americans stand on that side. Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes. There are millions of young people who are coming into the political process who also support democracy and freedom. So I'm feeling good and optimistic about it. As to the emoluments clause, it's just like Section 3 of the 14th Amendment itself. It's very clear in the Constitution. The President of the United States may not accept a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office, or a title of any kind whatever from a prince, a king, or a foreign government without the consent of Congress. And yet we showed yesterday, we've got the documented receipts that Donald Trump pocketed $7.8 million from foreign governments, from China, from Saudi Arabia, from United Arab Emirates, without ever coming to Congress first. It took us 7 years to accumulate all of this information. We've got a 150-page report with 750 footnotes, and they have not laid a glove on our report. They have not found a single thing that they claim to be factually inaccurate. All they're saying is, well, Donald Trump didn't take his salary of $400,000. I'm sorry. Under the Constitution of the United States, that's all you're allowed to take is your salary. You can't get paid by Chinese communist bureaucrats or murderous Saudi monarchs. You've got to be paid by the American people. That's how the framers designed our Constitution. Yeah, and we'll do one more and then I think we're, yes?
We're already 3 years out from January 6th. A question for any of the lawmakers here. Are you concerned about the institutional knowledge of January 6th and what happened since then fading from this place?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. We should be having tours of the Capitol grounds and the Capitol of exactly what took place on January 6th. And I hope that we will get to a point where there will be an exhibit inside the Capitol which talks about Sergeant Gonell and Harry Dunn and Michael Fanone and the police officers who put their lives on the line on that day, that talks about the heroes of democracy who stood up for the Constitution. Right now, we are still stressed about whether we're going to be able to get through this election on a free and fair basis. But when we defeat Trump and we defeat Trumpism, we will be able to get to a point where January 6th will be a day where we can celebrate the heroes and the champions of democracy like Sergeant Gonell. And I should say, Sergeant Gonell, has had to leave the Capitol Force because of injuries he received to his shoulder, to his foot, to other parts of his body. He's had to leave and go and create a new life. But he's written a beautiful book you all should read called American Shield, about his journey from being an immigrant to the country to realizing his dream as a Capitol police officer to standing up on January 6th and then trying to see that justice is done. But this is a struggle that is continuing to this very day. My friends, we are in the fight of our lives, but it is a fight that we are determined and resolved to win. Thank you for coming.
I just going to say one more thing, and I wasn't born here in this country, but I did take my oath to this country very seriously. When I became a U.S. citizen, when I joined the military, when I became a police officer, and when I swore an oath to protect this building. And again, when I got promoted to sergeant twice in the military and here at the Capitol. I left the department almost a year ago. I separated because of the injury, both physical, mental, and also moral. Because what the Republican Party are doing and saying is that my injuries, all those 3 types, I made up, that I fake those injuries. And they do not support what I had done for this country, all the sacrifices that I had done for this country. 23 years of my life as a public servant. In no good conscience, can I continue to protect them? That's one of the reasons why I left last year, in 2022, I'm sorry. Because I cannot trust them to defend the country. I couldn't trust them to have my back. If there was another incident here at the Capitol, would they be helping me secure the building? or would they be restraining me and preventing me from protecting my these individuals behind me, including themselves and their family? I couldn't trust them, and I still don't. So every single time that they say they support police officers, don't believe them, because they don't. It's just made up things that they like to say in public, but in reality, they had not taken any action to support that. Today, I had the privilege to be in the newsroom with my former colleagues, Harry Dunn. He made an announcement today because some of the same members who participated in the riot, in the mob, they have been running for candidacy to be in a position of power, public trust. And then they should not be the only one running for those positions. Harry Dunn today declared that he's a candidate for the 3rd District of Maryland, and I'll support him. Because we need people like him, somebody who's going to put his life on the line for you, for this country, for this place. Some of the people who I defended, I don't trust them, especially from the Republican. They had not had my back. I shouldn't have their back, and no longer would I have their back. And I think it's a shame that they don't see the sacrifices that we did on January 6th. Not just me, but the entire department, including Metropolitan Police. And it is insane that they continue to do this, supporting the same person that sent the mob to kill them and their colleagues. But please support Harry. Please support Harry. Get him in office. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate everyone coming out. Thank you again. Take care.